Rob Shoplock, how are you?
I'm doing really good. I appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. I'm pumped. And you've been, I mean, apparently you saw some of my original episodes where like the original version has like the drive-through Dry Creek Ranch and stuff. Yeah, dude, how embarrassing is that?
No, that was awesome. The music coming in to entering Dry Creek,
dude,
it was great.
The doors were lit. Like that original intro was so fun to do.
Yeah.
And then it just, I don't know, there was something about like, first off, the point is I got worried about using the doors too aggressive. Like I should probably switch to like a different thing. So I ended up switching.
I think it's great.
Yeah. It's a good time. Listen, you're the president of the Professional Firefighters Association, correct?
Yes.
Okay. God, I got that right. I'm really happy. Pull this a little bit closer. Hold this arm and just pull it on. There you go. Okay. Perfect. There's a lot here. There's a lot going on with firefighters. Idaho is a right to work state, which means if I would like to be a firefighter and we have a firefighters union, I do not have to join the union, which puts you, the union, in a position where you have to justify through value to individuals why you exist. It's like, hey, you should join us because we do these good things to you. And people get to make their own decisions on, okay, yeah, like I like this or I don't like this, and you go from there. So in that way, you don't have a lot of opportunity to abuse the system because you obviously have to gain your membership. You have to justify your membership on a daily basis. You have to earn your attendance. And you do that. But there's now a bill that's really hammering the firefighters union in Idaho. Talk to me about what the bill is.
Before I get into the bill, can I tell
Please.
you about buy-in and why we have such high membership rates in the state of Idaho? And this is my 17th session down at the Capitol. So getting to watch where we've come as an organization, we're just over 1,500 members right now. Firefighters in Idaho since the 70s have been passing health and safety bills. They started with heart and lung. They moved into HIV for when, you're on a call, hepatitis B. And then we moved in over the last 15, 20 years where we've got presumptive illness, cancer. We've got post-traumatic stress. We have catastrophic disability. We have a very secure pension system. I mean, all those things, when someone joins the fire department, they go, why am I joining the PFFI? Why am I joining the IAFF? And they go, there's value there for me and my family. And I believe that's why we're so successful in retaining members in our association.
And again, we're talking about things that are unique to this profession. Like you have a higher instance, obviously lung cancer and lung damage is a very, very well-known thing. Yeah. But you also have, porous intake of toxins through suits and whatnot. Because I mean, there's a fire, you're probably sweating in there, and then of course pores open up. These are, PTSD stuff. I have a very, very dear friend that was a firefighter in Orange County for some time, and he has told me about stories of people dying, or he's trying to save their lives, and he would articulate, it's like, it literally is like you look down and it's like you're staring at a burnt piece of chicken that's staring back up at you, and you're trying to save this person's life. And it's so horrible hearing that. It's like, I mean, I was an SAT tutor. Like I have no point of reference with those types of things. These are things that are unique to firefighters. Like this is the job.
Yeah. And I think you really don't know maybe at the moment how that's going to affect you. And my wife at times will have this conversation. She'll be like, you were crying last night. And I'll wake up and, you're in a cold sweat and some memory pops up from some bad call that you had, whether it was a pediatric death or a drowning or, like you said, a triple fatal fire. And those are the things that I think you never really get rid of. It's in your mind, and we're trying to be proactive, so proactive in getting people mental health early instead of, we want to be proactive and not reactive. That's our goal.
And the version of mental health that for some reason sticks in my head is really one of like the 1970 kind of like PTSD dad who just kind of sits in the corner and drinks like quietly by himself and wants to be left alone. And what a terrible value proposition for our men and women that put themselves in harm's way. Like, okay, let me get this right. For the benefit of running into a burning building and saving strangers' lives, I get to then go home and just drink myself into oblivion and like be an aloof, terrible dad or mom, or maybe not even judgment on that, but just not be the person that I would like to be.
Right.
That's a rough one.
It is. And then, we've got a great international that's done research and stuff back to our cancers we were talking about. And when you find out that the turnouts that you're wearing are full of PFAS. And
what's PFAS?
It's the forever chemical. So once it gets into your system, it's a very high cancer causing. So we're working really hard with manufacturers right now to make safer gear. So when people are out training or you're on an incident, that you're not, just because you're wearing it, you're absorbing cancer causing chemicals. And that's what is fireproofing those turnouts. That's what's keeping, you safe. But in reality, it's slowly killing you. So we're up to a lot of challenges.
Yeah. So because of that, the firefighters union has been fighting for improved safety conditions since the 70s.
Yes.
And essentially like, hey, look, we have this myriad of problems. We are dealing with people of all variabilities of, like I was talking to, I just had a doctor and that was talking about, we were talking about vaccines and we were talking about Hep B, but you show up to a medical emergency. It's like, listen, you're dealing with whoever's there. You're not asking them their medical history.
Right.
First, you're like, hey man, before I go ahead and grab you out of there, can you answer a couple quick questions here?
Yeah. Can you sign this?
Yeah, right. Right.
No, and our IAFF from 1918 was formed because firefighters were working 28, 29 days in a row and then taking one day off. The first ambulances weren't for firefighters. They were for the horses because they were valued higher than the firefighters. So as we move through time, where firefighters go from 1 platoon system to a 2 platoon system to now where we work a 3 platoon, we work 1/3 of our life at the firehouse. I mean, when you really put it in perspective, I have 4 daughters. All of them are teenagers, 18, 19, 20.
Gosh.
Yeah, 18, 19, 20, 21. And
are they really 1 year apart, each of them? Oh my gosh.
we have 2 biological and 2 adopted. So
God
that's
bless you, sir.
People look at me like, how'd you do that?
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. But to know that, I've been away from them 1/3 of my life, but they see the good work that we're doing here. My best friend, Brandon Erickson, he was a firefighter in Eagle. He passed away 11 years ago. He had a back injury on the job, and his surgery, he passed away the next day. I mean, he was my best man in my wedding. I was his best man. I am emotionally tied to the success of the PFFI because of that relationship with Brandon. And I've always said, I will fight for the health and safety of this organization to the nth degree. And my kids see that, and they are very proud of the work that our association has done. So it wasn't done in vain.
Talk to me about this.
Okay. So 1971, Professional Firefighters of Idaho, it was a different association back then. The PFFI really didn't come into existence until 1981. We had 2 separate associations. They saw the need to have a voice in the workplace. And so what they did at the time is they passed collective bargaining in Idaho. So currently in Idaho, teachers and firefighters are the 2 that under state statute have collective bargaining. Now, law enforcement has ordinances in different communities that give them collective bargaining. So for us, what this bill is trying to do is strike away all other terms and conditions of employment. And for us, that's a safety net. That's the hours we work. That is the crew size. That is what apparatus we're using, what turnouts we're using, what air packs we're using. I mean, everything. The comment was...
Wait, may I ask, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to make sure I get this from the get-go. So this bill, so you guys have established agreements with the state and the employers, okay? And this bill is saying, hey, we're going to remove all of those agreements that you guys have fought for the last 5 decades.
Yep.
And we're removing this because... what's the problem that we're solving? Now, I'm sure you're a terrible person. That's fine. But aside from you being a terrible person, what's the nature of this?
Honestly, I don't know why someone would come in and say, we want to take away all other terms and conditions of employment, because that is when we sit down for a meeting, and I'll use my own department, we build a pyramid. Citizens are always up top. So everything trickles down from how do we provide the best service to the citizens? And that's the safe staffing. That's what we're putting on the, who's riding on the fire engine, what level of EMS care we're providing. That's a negotiated discussion. And then we put it into a contract and say, great, we're both going to live by this document. So, I don't know what the crux is behind it, or you would think at some point, whoever's running this would come to you and say, hey, I see a problem. I'm looking for a solution. We have the best relationship now that we've had with the fire chiefs in the state of Idaho, the fire commissioners, probably in the last decade. And not one of them, or those organizations, have come and said, we want to change something.
So essentially, and again, this is something I actually got educated on when I interviewed Brian Simpson and Clyde Dornier and Nate Murphy.
Yes.
Great, for Eagle Fire Commission. So you have fire commissions that are elected by the people that oversee the happenings of the actual fire district, right? So you have the Eagle Fire District, which is, parts of Meridian and, the unincorporated county, Eagle City, obviously. And then you have the fire commissioners, and they help with like, okay, we're going to need to figure out more funding here. They direct things and they oversee them. We have oversight committees. Yes. Great. That's all fine. They're not, though, that association of the fire commissioners in the state of Idaho is not coming to the actual firefighters and saying, hey, you guys are screwing up this thing, or like, hey, we have to walk back this expense because this expense has gone up 15% every single year for the last 7 years. In another 5 years, we will not have any money for anything else. Like this expense A has to go away. There's no conversation where they're like, hey, there's this big problem. Right. It's all of a sudden just at a state level, not even a municipality level. On a state level, it's, hey, we're going to wipe away every agreement you guys have made.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say, I think back in 50 years, the firefighters union has never bankrupted a city or a fire municipality, or a fire district. In fact, during the Great Recession, I was so proud of our members sitting down at the table on, hey, how do we still provide the best service without cutting response and putting a heavy burden on the firefighters? Like, we want to find a solution. And the amount of firefighters that went and sat at the table, adjusted their contracts and said, you know what, you're right. We need our cities to be profitable. The comment came, this is going to be more business-like. The fire service isn't a business, and if someone is trying to run it for profitability, they're in it for the wrong reasons. Our number one goal is our citizens. And when you hear somebody come in and say, we want a more business model. Well, are you trying to save money and hold it back from the taxpayers, or are we trying to take what we're given? And there's been a lot of tax bills over the last couple of years. So, you're working within a certain amount. You want to take that amount, and how do we continue to provide a competitive workforce while giving the best service to our citizens?
When people talk about running fire departments and districts more like a business, what do they mean? Because obviously you can't run deficits, right? Like you got to stay in the black. Okay. Yep. So first off, I'm not running a loss. Right. Okay. There is no revenue model. Right. Right. There's not like I'm sure you have, do you send out bills to people?
The only bills that I would say that usually come from the fire department is when plans review or something like that comes in for new construction, to help offset the cost of having the fire marshal review it and putting in safety procedures and standards, things like that.
Gotcha. But if I'm just a civilian at home and I say I got a hip surgery and then I fall and I can't get back up and we call you guys, I don't get a bill from you.
Nope.
Okay. So there's no real revenue model where it's okay, we actually need to bill the citizenry or our end user more or differently to accommodate, our expenses. So there's no revenue model there. You can't run you can't run in the black. You presumably you have the best efficiencies possible and you're using equipment, you're not just blowing through equipment left and right. It's let's get another truck for something put gold inlay. Yeah. So what, when they talk about running it like a business, what do they mean? What are those people tending towards?
I honestly, I couldn't give you a reason, or I don't have an answer for it because I really don't know. I don't know how you say a fire department should be run like a business when the fire department is set out for its number one cause is take care of the citizens. And if you want something more than that, do you want a savings account? Do you want to, I don't know. I'm not sure why they would say we need a business model, because years ago there was privatization of the fire service and those models failed. Most for-profit businesses have people that are shareholders that are making money off dividends or, selling it back. So for us, our revenue for most of our departments is either from the city council or city government rather, and then fire districts. So those are the two real authorities that exist. Now we do represent our firefighters at the INL. We have firefighters in the Guard. So there's, they benefit from our health and safety aspect of what bills we're running, but they have limited negotiations that they're able to do.
Okay. So bottom line is the firefighters union has worked to improve working conditions. There was no one specific working condition or terms of employment that has been articulated as problematic. And this just comes out of kind of left field saying, hey, we got to wipe this whole slate clean. Now, I presume whoever ran this bill, have you guys talked to that individual?
No. You'd think when someone's going to run a bill that is very controversial like this is, and the amount of bipartisan opposition that we've had to this bill is amazing, because I think a lot of legislators understand how important this is for firefighters' health and safety. There has not been any discussion or anybody reaching out and say, hey, we want to change something and here's why. And I think that's part of what firefighters and collective bargaining is about, is when there is an issue, the firefighters and admin come together and we try to solve the problem. So what problem we're looking for, in my mind, doesn't exist.
Well, there's a big sentiment towards free market and privatization, especially now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we saw this with the school choice that has come through, and a lot of people in favor of that have articulated like the miracle of the free market. Like,
right.
We're gonna open this up, and like it's gonna be incredible. It's like, I don't really know how you make money off like a second grader, but like it's fine. It's like, look, I'm an idiot, so don't look to me. Like, of course, it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, right. So what, like, talk to me about what has happened with those. I do recall certain instances of like the Malibu fires and whatnot. And then of course, there were the Maui fire. Like there were instances of very, very wealthy people that had private fire services that were able to save homes, that were in similar areas to people that just, couldn't stop them. Yeah. So that's like for uber wealthy people.
The only time I've ever seen that was when we were on, I think it was in 2007, there was a big fire up in Ketchum, and some insurance companies had set out privatization or private fire contractors. And I got to tell you, it's really hard in an ICS system when you have people traveling around in fire engines that aren't part of the system, because where's the accountability on somebody, cruising around that is not tied into what we're all doing? You have a common goal, right, and they say, hey, here's our strategy, here's our tactics. These resources are going to do it. And then you get there and like, who are you? So I really can't speak on the Maui or the California fires. I've yet to have the opportunity to meet with those leaders and say like, okay, what are the lessons learned? How do we make the fire service better? But I got to tell you, just the little bit I know about the California fires, you could have added, when you have that much wind and you have that much heat, you could have put 1,000 more firefighters on the ground. You probably would have had the same result. I mean, we saw it in the 70s in Chelsea, Massachusetts, all brick and mortar buildings. They had a rag fire, like oily rags caught fire. It burned a whole city down. Nothing to do with the urban interface. It was in downtown Massachusetts where it leveled the city. And it was kind of one of the first lessons I got in the fire service. Like it doesn't matter where you are, you put the right conditions together and there's not a whole lot you can do.
Okay. So the bottom line is you're saying, look, even if you have private contractors, and again, like we have wildlands contractors that go and supplement, because like we don't need, you just don't need that year round. That's different than what you guys do, obviously, which is, you're not addressing like the summer wildlands fires like other people. Like had Charlie Lyons on. He was fantastic from the Rangeland Fire Protection Association, I believe. But bottom line is we don't have a viable alternate mechanism for this. Like even if we made working conditions intolerable for firefighters in the hope that a private industry would erupt out of the ashes, so to speak, of the universal fire protection, we don't have a model anywhere in the world that's actually, or anywhere in the country that's actually worked.
Not to my knowledge. No,
okay.
Not to my knowledge. And I think you bring up a really good point. Say you get rid of collective bargaining.
Sure.
And all of a sudden you have a commission or a city that says, hey, we're going to make money by sending our fire trucks out. Guess what, men and women of this fire department, tomorrow we're sending our 3 brush rigs to go make money, and you don't have a say in if you get or you do or you don't get to do that. That's something, every summer, like, I work at Eagle. We have a dozer. We have 4 brush trucks. If we're going to deploy, we sit down, we have a good conversation with management of how do we make sure our citizens are taken care of, and how do we support the national effort, and how do we send and deploy the proper resources. Sure. So it's not only, hey, we want to get our members trained up, we want to assist other states or other departments, but we got to make sure that our number one goal is protecting the citizens of the district that you work in.
Right. I actually spoke with Brad Ritchie after he'd sent, I think it was like 104 firefighters down to California. And he was saying, yeah, look, that we were able to do it. It didn't cost our citizenry or municipality. We weren't worried about it. And like, those guys go down, they get better experience and all kinds of different things. And we're assisting, neighboring states.
Yeah.
So where is this then? So like you paint a pretty conclusive picture of like, hey, look, there's no quarter given nor received. Like this is all in, we're eliminating every benefit that you have fought for, anything aside from like the base employment. Where are things now with this process?
So yeah, it's been printed. I mean, when the representative gave his speech at the print hearing, it worked out well. Our convention was in town. We had 150 firefighters here, and we got to rally to the Capitol and listen to this presentation.
What was said in the presentation? I'm dying to understand. Like what was said in the presentation?
Yeah. It came back to more of the it's a little more business friendly type. I don't want to misquote because that's really one of my first things that I do respect anybody who puts their name out there and is going to run for the legislature, and I don't want to misquote them. There wasn't this happened, we need to make a holistic change to Idaho. And what I've learned over the 17 years is if there's a problem, make sure it's an Idaho solution. And that was with our cancer bill, our PTSI, and a catastrophic disability. That's a clear message from the speaker, from the, pro tem to the governor, is always make sure it's an Idaho solution. We never heard of a problem in there where you would need a solution, but to strike a line and to kind of have that comment of, well, you still get to talk about your pay. Yeah, but the safety aspect is what is not just for the citizens, but for your firefighters is so important to us. And, Idaho has a really unique collective bargaining contract. It's strikes are prohibited in Idaho. So no matter what challenges you're going through in a contract negotiation, you're always going to have your firefighters in their stations responding to calls.
So bottom line is it got a reading.
Yep.
He put it out there, and where is it now? Like, is it going to be debated on the House?
It was referred to Commerce and Human Resources, where that is the appropriate place for labor issues to go.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as of this time right now, there's no planned hearing. I am, definitely can't speak for anybody on that committee, but that's what we're watching to see if it comes up.
And not that I think it's appropriate at all, but are there any consolations that you guys even have in mind, which is like, well, I guess if like push comes to shove, like we could give up this thing. Like, I don't know, like what, if there hasn't been a problem articulated, you're kind of like solving a problem that you don't know what the nature of the actual problem is, but is there any like bargaining? It's like, okay, look, just calm everything down. Like, I understand you didn't really like this thing we did like 5 years ago. So like, we'll walk that. Is there anything like that?
We talked about that with the fire chiefs years ago. We had a fire chief in the East that was, hey, we got to make some changes. And he says, just a broad term is too much. And we said, bring us the list of what you think, because we have our list. And really, the comment was made, it can take 6 months to debate the color of a bathroom. Our contracts all have management rights in there. There's certain things that we don't have the ability to negotiate, and that is placed into our contracts. And we agree upon those things that yes, management's going to make the decision on what color to paint the bathrooms. Are they coming to ask us? Of course, because we spend a third of our life there. They want our input. I mean, that builds. If in my marriage, I didn't have, some checks and balances back and forth. Like it takes two of us. If it was my wife is going to run everything, I'm probably not going to be the happiest husband. But if we can negotiate on how things need to work at home, guess what? Our marriage and our kids' lives, we're going to be so much more successful because we've partnered together on making the positive change. I mean, my wife and I, family sits at the top of our pyramid. So when we make decisions, it puts family on top, and then our decisions come second to it. So I see that being, how do you fix something that's not broken? I don't know if there's a way, because I could probably capture in over the last 24 years that I've worked in the fire department what things I think should be, but I guarantee the next day someone's like, oh, we should have put that in. So leaving it broad to me it's a necessity, and it's a time saver, and it's not, we know what the management rights are, and we know what we're able to bargain at the workplace.
And when you say leaving it broad, that's essentially just saying, look, we have a broad scope where we can apply different things. Like this is essentially a living agreement.
Yes.
And it will change as we change. It will change as our risks and knowledge of risky situations change. It will change as our needs and our society changes. But it has to have that malleability if it's actually going to effectively integrate the needs of our professional firefighters, and then obviously the constraints of our society.
Yes. And I got to tell you, I have a unique situation. The first 7 years I worked in Eagle, we were a non-union fire department. We then became a union fire department, and that's where we've been since 2007. I've worked in both atmospheres, and I understand what it's like to have, one paid firefighter with one or two volunteers on a fire engine, to, as growth happens in Eagle, just naturally goes to, we're going to staff it with firefighters. You go from 800 calls a year to a few, 3, 4, 5,000 calls a year. You can't expect the neighbors to run over to the firehouse, hop on a rig, and go to a call. We're much too busy. And seeing it back in the day to today, the professionalism, I'm proud of it. I'm so proud of not just our organization, but statewide, the effort that labor and management have put together to build a fire service that meets the citizens' demands. And I feel like stripping that away and going back to what I started at would be such a decline, and not just in service, morale. At the time, my fire chief years ago was the HR director, and it was very told to me early in my career, if you ever go talk to one of my bosses about something I've done, you're fired.
No.
And so how do you have that, that there's no checks and balances? You work in the fear of, I make him mad or her mad, I'm terminated. And that was the life I lived for 7 years, as did the firefighters with me. Now, granted, when we formed our local, bringing management and the firefighters together and really put out the best product for the citizens was one of my proudest moments, I think, in the fire service, and what we were able to accomplish by, again, back to that pyramid. Here's the citizens. What do the firefighters want, and what does management want, and how do we keep a department that is not just profitable, but setting funds aside for the future? And I think once you learn that stuff, and maybe admin didn't really express that in the future, we sat down and we really learned a lot about budgeting and what it takes to run a fire department. So, it's good.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Listen, I really appreciate you. I think there are so many things that I've learned in the last 6 months doing this, and especially in the last 2 months. It's like, wow, there are some real issues in our state. One, I have Colonel Gardner from ISP coming on soon, because it used to be like 10 years ago or 20 years ago that we had one state trooper per 4,500 people.
Yeah.
Now it's one state trooper per 6,500 people. It's like, okay. Now look, I don't know. I don't work in that field. So I don't know if he's like, yeah, we're still doing okay, but like, you don't want to go to 7,500, 1% or 1 per, or like, no, we're actually seeing like real problems. Like, these are things I want to understand, but I do see our emergency response systems really getting stretched. We had the same thing with Chief Tominski and Chief Stoll down in Canyon County, and then Star Fire District. And these are two men. They came and explained the situation to me. I'm like, wow, I don't live in any of these taxing districts, so like I'm not even making a call one way or another, but like what you're explaining makes a lot of sense, that we've experienced this mass growth. We've really stretched our budgets aggressively. Tominski has all the funds he needs to build an actual fire station. He has no money for actual salaries. He's like, yeah, the building will be beautiful, right? Like, it'll be a brand new fire station. Great. Nobody's in the truck. Like, nobody's actually sleeping in the bed. When you call, like, nobody's coming out of that fire station, because and it's not it's not a linear progression with hiring. It's like, you can add one more police officer. You can add one more, deputy. You can't add one more fire. Like, if you want to staff a station, you need like 9 people, right? Like, this is a real thing. And there's a lot there, right? Like, I think the citizens it sounds like the citizens of Idaho are worried about their tax burdens. And it's like, God bless it. Like, we absolutely should be worried about our tax burdens. But at the same time, I think we also need to consider like what the cost benefit analysis is of continuing to stretch our emergency services to the point where they're like, listen, we told you 3 times we couldn't, and now the wait time is like 12 minutes, when it should have been 5 or 6 minutes, and everybody knew that. But now, if you have a heart attack, nah, man, we're not getting there for like over 10 minutes, and you're just going to have to wait. And I know striking that balance and addressing that is very difficult. And
I got to tell you, it's one of the things I like to talk to citizens about when they just ask questions about, like, why do you guys need a fire station here and stuff? Some of the communities that so there's an insurance, right? You have to pay your homeowner's insurance.
Sure.
That is based upon a fire station. And when you put a fire station in, your insurance rates can drop. In the same sentiment, if you don't have that, your insurance rates can go up. So if you pay less in property tax, but higher insurance, you have a less of a service. If you pay a little bit more in property tax and less in property insurance, you have a better service with crews. And you made me think of that when you said, hey, I'm going to build a fire station with nobody in there. 8 or 10 years ago, we almost delivered a baby in the fire station. I can't imagine being a mom with her mom driving her to the hospital was like, nope, this thing's coming, hit the firehouse, and having someone go up and knock on the door and to an empty fire station. Especially, in this area, I get it. Idaho's 85% rural, 15% of the population lives in these metropolitan areas or, bigger city areas, but you wouldn't expect that here. And I think the citizens, really do need to evaluate, okay, what are we willing to pay for a service that's available for us 24/7?
Yeah, man. What are you willing to pay?
And that's where labor and management come together and they try to solve these problems. And I think, again, if you take that out, you're really burdening the citizens and the employee group. And I'll give you one more example of this. We had a fire chief years ago who was going to leave, and his thought was, hey, I'm going to put this person in who he's never been a firefighter before. How is that individual best trained to run a fire department when you've never spent one day as a firefighter? I can't think of one chief that didn't come from the line, work their way up, and understand what it's like to work a 30-year life. So they still have the same values we do, citizens first. And when we work together, they might remind us at times, hey, remember when I was sitting in the engine with you going to a call? And you're like, okay. Boss still remembers what it was like back back when he was online or she was online. So yeah, I think it's look, we have a great relationship with our citizens. We have a lot of trust, and I think they have a lot of trust in us. And I would hope that citizens will be involved in this and would say, wait a second, you're not doing this to my firefighters. These people are here 24/7, willing to do whatever it takes. And I tell you, the diversity of calls from 25 years ago to today, it's just increased what we're doing. We're not seeing less of it.
Right.
So,
Rob, I really appreciate you coming in, explaining this.
I can't thank you enough. And I appreciate you. I love so much of where this podcast has come. It's so good to be here, and I'm very blessed, and I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's do this when all of this passes and we can just share a drink.
Yeah.
That'd be great. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate you.